Walking through my childhood home's front door after 6 months volunteering at an orphanage in Guatemala, I expected tearful reunions and warm embraces. Instead, I found my younger sister Madison parading around our living room in my custom-made ivory wedding dress, the one I'd spent 2 years saving for and designing with every detail planned to perfection. She clutched the arm of my fiancé Ryan, beaming as she announced to our parents, "I'd like you to meet my husband." My parents, Gerald and Patricia, stood nearby, refusing to make eye contact with me. Madison's voice dripped with smugness as she continued, "Ryan finally realized who he truly loved while you were gone." I stared at this impossible scene unfolding before me. Then something inside me snapped, and I began laughing uncontrollably. Madison's triumphant expression faltered as she demanded, "What exactly do you find so amusing?" I wiped tears from my eyes, still chuckling as I replied, "Because the man you married was—" My sister's face transformed from smug satisfaction to pure confusion as I continued laughing. She tightened her grip on the man she believed was Ryan, but I could see uncertainty creeping into her eyes. Gerald cleared his throat nervously, while Patricia fidgeted with her wedding ring, both avoiding my gaze completely. "Amy, what are you talking about?" Madison snapped, her voice rising an octave. "This is Ryan, your former fiancé, who is now my devoted husband." I composed myself, wiping the last traces of laughter-induced tears from my cheeks. "Madison, sweetheart, I need to tell you something important. The real Ryan broke up with me 3 months into my Guatemala trip with the most heartless text message I've ever received. He wrote that he needed someone more mature, someone who understood his ambitions better than I ever could." The color began draining from Madison's face as I continued. I was devastated, completely isolated in a foreign country with nothing but my mission work to keep me sane. So I called my college friend Marcus. You remember him from the theater department, the struggling actor who always said he could become anyone with the right motivation. The man standing next to Madison shifted uncomfortably, and I noticed him glance toward the door as if calculating an escape route. Madison's grip on his arm loosened slightly. Marcus proposed the most outrageous plan I'd ever heard. He said he would come here, pretend to be Ryan, and expose exactly what kind of people my family really were when they thought I wasn't watching. I refused. At first told him it was insane and cruel, but he convinced me that seeing everyone's true character would be worth the temporary deception. Patricia gasped audibly, pressing her hand to her chest. "Amy, that's impossible. We would have known if this wasn't Ryan." I pulled out my phone and showed them a side-by-side photo comparison. Marcus spent weeks studying Ryan's mannerisms from the videos and pictures I'd shared on social media over the years. He practiced Ryan's laugh, his way of holding his coffee cup, even that annoying habit of tapping his fingers when he's thinking. Marcus has always been incredibly talented at becoming other people. It's why he chose acting as his career. Madison stared at the photos, her breathing becoming shallow and rapid. "This can't be real. We've been living together for 2 months. I would know if he wasn't Ryan." Marcus finally spoke, his voice, dropping the slight southern accent he'd been affecting to match Ryan's speech patterns. "Madison, I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but Amy's telling the truth. I've been Marcus Thompson this entire time." "Prove it," Gerald demanded, stepping forward with his chest puffed out in a display of paternal authority that felt 20 years too late. Marcus reached up and carefully removed the colored contact lenses he'd been wearing. Instead of Ryan's distinctive blue eyes, warm brown ones looked back at us. Madison stumbled backward, releasing his arm as if she'd been burned. I changed my hair color, wore colored contacts, and even practiced changing my handwriting, Marcus explained calmly. I studied every photo and video Amy had of Ryan until I could mimic him perfectly. The engagement ring I gave you, purchased with money, Amy provided specifically for this purpose. Patricia sank into her floral armchair, the same one she'd occupied during countless family meetings over the years. "Gerald, what have we done?" Madison's voice came out as barely a whisper. "The wedding ceremony, the marriage certificate, everything we signed, all fake documents. I confirmed. Marcus has connections in the theater world who specialize in creating realistic props for period productions. The marriage certificate, the identification he showed the officiant, even the business cards he left with you claiming to be from Ryan's construction company, all expertly crafted fakes. Madison began shaking, whether from rage or shock I couldn't determine. You've been living a lie with me for 2 months, sharing my bed, meeting my friends, pretending to love me. Marcus had the decency to look genuinely remorseful. Madison, I want you to know that my feelings for you developed into something real, despite how this all started. You're beautiful, intelligent, and passionate about the things you care about. But you need to understand why Amy felt this was necessary. Gerald found his voice again, though it sounded hollow. Amy, how could you do something so cruel to your own family? Cruel. I repeated, feeling my composure slip for the first time since entering the house. Let me tell you what's cruel, Dad. Cruel is your daughter stealing her sister's wedding dress and marrying her fiancé while she's overseas doing humanitarian work. Cruel is parents who not only allow this betrayal, but actively encourage it. Cruel is discovering that the people you trusted most in the world were celebrating your misfortune the moment you were out of sight. Tears were streaming down Madison's face now, but they seemed more like tears of humiliation than genuine remorse. Everything I told my friends, all the plans I made, the job I quit, because I thought I was marrying someone wealthy. That brings us to the next part of this story, I said, settling into the love seat across from my parents. Madison, you might want to sit down for what comes next. Madison remained standing, swaying slightly as if the ground beneath her had become unstable. Marcus moved to steady her, but she jerked away from his touch, her eyes blazing with a mixture of betrayal and growing comprehension that something far worse was about to be revealed. You mentioned wealth, Madison. I began, my voice steady despite the tremor I felt building in my chest. Tell me what made you think Ryan was such a good financial catch. His family's construction business, she replied automatically, her voice hollow. The expensive dinners, the designer gifts, the down payment he made on that luxury apartment downtown, he clearly had money. I nodded slowly. All of that was real. The gifts, the dinners, the apartment deposit, all of it happened exactly as you experienced. But Madison, where do you think that money actually came from? Gerald leaned forward in his recliner, his weathered hands gripping the armrests. What are you getting at, Amy? Every single dollar Marcus spent on Madison came from my inheritance. Grandma Dorothy's inheritance that she left me specifically for my wedding and starting my life with someone I loved. The inheritance I'd been saving for 2 years, adding my own money from my nursing job, planning for a future with someone who actually cared about me. Patricia's face went ashen. The money Ryan said came from his construction business. Was my money being funneled through Marcus's bank account? I transferred $25,000 to him over the course of 4 months. The 5-carat engagement ring he bought you, Madison, that was supposed to be my wedding band. The weekend trip to Napa Valley you bragged about on Instagram paid for with money I earned working double shifts in the pediatric intensive care unit. Madison collapsed onto the couch as if her legs had given out. $25,000, you spent your entire inheritance on this sick joke. Not a joke, I corrected. A revelation. I wanted to see who you really were when you thought you could take whatever you wanted from my life without consequences. And boy, did you show me. Marcus spoke up quietly. Amy, should I tell them about the recordings? Recordings. Gerald's voice cracked on the word. I pulled out a small digital recording device. Marcus has been recording your conversations for the past 8 weeks. Would you like to hear what my loving family really thinks of me? Before anyone could protest, I pressed play. Madison's voice filled the room crystal clear. I never understood what Ryan saw in Amy anyway. She's too serious, always working, never any fun. When she left for that do-gooder trip to Guatemala, I knew it was my chance to show him what he was missing. I mean, I've always been the prettier sister. I fast-forwarded to another section. Patricia's voice emerged from the speaker. Amy has always been too naive to handle a man like Ryan. Madison knows how to keep a man interested. Besides, Amy will find someone else when she gets back. She's always been too focused on helping other people to know what's good for her. The room fell silent except for the sound of Patricia's quiet sobbing. I wasn't finished. "Here's my personal favorite," I said, finding another section. Gerald's voice boomed from the device. "That boy's got more money than sense, and he's smart enough to see that Madison's got more style than Amy ever will. Hell, I'm proud that one of my daughters finally landed someone who can take care of her properly." Gerald's face turned red with embarrassment and anger, though I suspected the anger was directed more at being caught than at his own actions. "But wait, there's more," I continued relentlessly. "Madison, remember that heart-to-heart conversation you had with Marcus about your true feelings, the one where you thought you were being honest with your new husband?" Madison's eyes widened in horror. "Amy, please don't." I pressed play again. Madison's voice filled the room. "I'll be honest, I don't think I could ever love you the way Amy claimed to love you, but I could never pass up the financial security you offer. I've never had a man spend this kind of money on me. As long as you keep treating me like a princess, I'll be the perfect wife." Marcus winced at hearing his deception validated by Madison's equally calculating confession. "Now for the financial part that will really interest you all," I continued. "Patricia, remember when you borrowed $15,000 from Madison's college fund to help pay for the wedding? You said Ryan's family would reimburse you for the reception costs." Patricia nodded miserably. "And Gerald, you co-signed the lease on that luxury apartment because you believed your new son-in-law was financially stable, right?" "Amy, where are you going with this?" Gerald asked, though his tone suggested he was beginning to understand. "You're both financially liable for debts incurred under false pretenses. Patricia Madison's college fund is gone, spent on a fake wedding to a fake groom. Gerald, you're on the hook for $1,200 a month rent for an apartment that Marcus will be vacating immediately, since this charade is over." Madison's voice came out as a whisper. "The college fund is really gone. Completely." Patricia confirmed, unable to look at her daughter. "I thought we were investing in your future with a wealthy husband. I thought Ryan's family would cover everything once they saw how happy you made their son. And my job." Madison continued, the full scope of her situation finally becoming clear. "I quit my position at Dr. Harrison's dental practice because I thought I was becoming a wealthy housewife. I told everyone I was too good to work anymore." That brings us to the next devastating piece of information. I said, though I was beginning to feel the weight of what I'd orchestrated. "Madison, you've been living off my inheritance money for 2 months, posting about your lavish lifestyle on social media, quitting your job, and making financial commitments based on a completely false foundation. But that's not the worst part." "How could it possibly get worse?" Madison asked, her voice barely audible. "Because while you were playing house with Marcus and spending my money, the real Ryan was building a life with someone else entirely, someone you know very well." Just as I spoke those words, we all heard a car pulling into the driveway. Through the living room window, I could see a familiar silver sedan parking behind my rental car. "Perfect timing," I murmured, watching 2 figures emerge from the vehicle. The front door opened without a knock, and the real Ryan walked in his arm around a visibly pregnant woman whose face made Madison gasp in recognition. "Hello, everyone," Ryan said with a smug grin that I remembered all too well. "I'd like you to meet my wife, Jessica." The pregnant woman clinging to Ryan's arm was Jessica Warner, my former maid of honor, and the person I had considered my closest friend since high school. She wore a flowing maternity dress that accentuated her rounded belly and a wedding ring that caught the afternoon light streaming through our living room windows. Madison stared at Jessica in complete shock. "You're pregnant and married to Ryan." Jessica's smile was sickeningly sweet as she rubbed her belly. 6 months along, and we've been married for 4 months now. Ryan and I realized we were meant to be together long before Amy left for Guatemala. 4 months. I did quick math in my head. That means you got married just 2 months after Ryan broke up with me. Ryan shrugged with casual indifference. "When you know, you know. Jessica understands my ambitions better than you ever did, Amy. She supports my business goals instead of constantly nagging me about spending too much time at work. Your business goals? I repeated slowly, pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. Jessica, how exactly did you end up with my former fiancé? Jessica exchanged a meaningful glance with Madison before answering. Amy, honey, you were so focused on your nursing career and then that Guatemala trip that you never noticed how unhappy Ryan was. I was just being a good friend listening when he needed someone to talk to. Listening, Marcus said quietly, speaking for the first time since Ryan and Jessica had arrived. Is that what you call seducing an engaged man? Ryan's expression darkened as he looked at Marcus. Who the hell is this guy and why is he wearing my face? This is Marcus Thompson, I explained, an actor who's been pretending to be you for the past 2 months while you were apparently building a life with my former best friend. Pretending to be me? Ryan's voice rose dangerously. Do you have any idea what this could do to my business reputation? My company's name is built on trust and reliability. Jessica placed a calming hand on Ryan's arm. Ryan, sweetheart, let's not get worked up. The important thing is that everything worked out the way it was supposed to. Worked out the way it was supposed to. I stared at Jessica in disbelief. You stole my fiancé and my sister married an imposter. How is any of this supposed to work out? Madison finally found her voice. Jessica, how long have you been planning this? How long have you been involved with Ryan? Jessica's mask of sweetness slipped slightly. Madison, you knew exactly what you were doing when you started flirting with who you thought was Ryan. Don't act innocent now. I knew what I was doing. Madison's voice pitched higher. You set me up. You told me that Ryan was having doubts about Amy, that he was looking for someone more sophisticated and mature. I simply pointed out what was already obvious to everyone except Amy. Jessica replied coldly. Ryan needed a partner who understood that successful men require certain types of support. You seemed eager to provide that support. Patricia, who had been silent during this exchange, finally spoke up. Jessica, dear, I don't understand. If you were interested in Ryan, why did you encourage Madison to pursue him? Jessica laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Because I needed Madison to keep Ryan distracted and interested while I worked on convincing him to leave Amy permanently. Madison was so obvious in her attraction to him, and Ryan's ego loved the attention. It made my job easier. Gerald stood up from his recliner, his face red with indignation. You used my daughter as bait in your scheme to steal Amy's fiancé. Your daughter was a willing participant. Jessica shot back. Madison knew exactly what she wanted, and it wasn't love. She wanted Ryan's money and status. I simply provided her with an opportunity to pursue those things. Ryan nodded approvingly. Jessica's right. Madison made her intentions clear from the beginning. She was attracted to my success, not my personality. Success. I repeated, feeling pieces of the puzzle continuing to fall into place. Jessica, how did you know so much about Ryan's financial situation? What do you mean? She asked, but I could see wariness creeping into her expression. I mean, how did you know enough about his business and finances to convince Madison that he was such a good catch? You're a nurse at Mercy General, not a financial advisor. Jessica's pause lasted a moment too long. Ryan told me about his business, obviously. Did he also tell you about the financial problems his company has been having? I asked, watching both Ryan and Jessica's expressions carefully. The problems that started around the time you two began your affair. Ryan's face went pale. How could you possibly know about that? Because Marcus isn't just an actor, Ryan. He's also a third-year law student who specializes in business and financial law. When I told him about your construction company, he did some research. Public records are fascinating things. Marcus stepped forward, his demeanor shifting from apologetic actor to serious law student. Ryan, your company has been sued 17 times in the past 18 months for incomplete work cost overruns and substandard materials. You've been taking deposits from clients and using that money to pay debts from previous jobs. That's a standard business practice, Ryan protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Not when you're not completing the jobs you've been paid for, Marcus continued, and definitely not when you're billing elderly clients for work that was never performed. Jessica's hand tightened on Ryan's arm. Ryan, you told me those lawsuits were just disgruntled clients trying to get free work. They are, Ryan insisted, but sweat had begun beading on his forehead. I pulled out my phone again. Marcus, should we play them the recording you made yesterday? What recording? Ryan demanded. Marcus looked apologetic but determined. The conversation you had with Jessica last week when you thought I was asleep on the couch. The one where you discussed how you've been overcharging clients and using inferior materials to increase your profit margins. Jessica's face went white. You recorded us. I recorded everything, Marcus confirmed, including Jessica's confession about stealing medications from her job at the hospital to sell online. The room erupted in chaos. Gerald began shouting at Ryan about corrupting his daughters. Patricia demanded to know how long Jessica had been a criminal. Madison screamed at everyone for lying to her. Ryan threatened to call the police on Marcus for fraud and illegal recording. In the midst of all this noise, I stood up and walked to the center of the room. Everyone needs to stop talking and listen to me right now. Something in my tone cut through the chaos, and gradually the room fell silent. You all seem to think this is about revenge or hurt feelings. I began, my voice steady despite the emotional storm swirling around me. You think I orchestrated this elaborate scheme because I was a heartbroken woman who couldn't accept that her fiancé left her for someone else. I looked at each person in turn, meeting their eyes deliberately. But this was never about Ryan leaving me. This was about discovering who you all really were when you thought I wasn't watching. And what I discovered was worse than I ever imagined. Amy, Patricia began, but I held up my hand to stop her. I'm not finished. Because everything you've heard so far is just the beginning. The real reason I came home today, the real reason I've been documenting everything through Marcus, is because I've been building a legal case against all of you for the past 6 months, and tomorrow morning, that case goes to the district attorney's office. The silence that followed was deafening. I walked to the dining room and retrieved a thick manila folder I'd placed there when I first entered the house. The folder was at least 2 inches thick, filled with documents, photographs, and legal papers that represented months of careful preparation. This folder contains evidence of multiple felonies committed by every person in this room except Marcus and myself, I announced, setting it down on the coffee table with a decisive thud. Identity fraud, marriage fraud, financial fraud, theft, prescription, drug trafficking, construction fraud, and conspiracy to commit emotional distress. Ryan took a step backward. You can't prove any of that. Actually, I can, I replied calmly. Marcus isn't just an actor and law student. His uncle is Detective Frank Thompson with the County Sheriff's Department, and his cousin is Assistant District Attorney Sarah Chen. When I first told Marcus about my situation, he immediately understood the legal implications of what we were planning to document. Jessica's voice came out as a whisper. You've been building a criminal case against us. For 6 months, I confirmed. Since the day Ryan broke up with me and I realized that my family and friends were celebrating my misfortune instead of supporting me through it. I opened the folder and pulled out the first set of documents. Madison, you committed marriage fraud when you married Marcus, using fake identification documents. Even though you believed you were marrying Ryan, you still signed legal papers under false pretenses. That's a felony that carries up to 5 years in prison. Madison's legs gave out and she collapsed back onto the couch. 5 years. Patricia and Gerald, I continued, you both committed financial fraud when you used Madison's college fund and co-signed loans based on false information about Ryan's identity and financial status. You also filed false insurance claims when you listed Ryan as living in your house to get better rates, even though the person living here wasn't actually Ryan. Gerald's face had gone gray. We could lose the house. Ryan. I said, turning to my former fiancé. Your construction business is about to face a comprehensive investigation. I've been in contact with 7 families who paid you substantial deposits for work that was never completed. Mrs. Elizabeth Harper, age 74, paid you $12,000 for a kitchen renovation that you abandoned after tearing out her cabinets. Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez gave you $8,000 for a bathroom remodel, and you disappeared after the first day of demolition. Ryan's bravado was crumbling. Those clients were unreasonable. They kept changing their minds about what they wanted. Is that why you kept their money? I asked. Because they were unreasonable. And Jessica. I continued pulling out another set of documents. I have security footage from Mercy General showing you removing medications from the pharmacy without proper authorization. I also have text message records showing you selling those medications to buyers online. Jessica's hand flew to her throat. That's impossible. I never used your position as a nurse to steal Percocet, Adderall, and anxiety medications. I interrupted. Never sold them through an encrypted messaging app to college students and chronic pain patients who couldn't afford legitimate prescriptions. Marcus pulled out his phone. Should I play the recording where Jessica explains to Ryan how much money she's made from her side business? No, Jessica said quickly. That's not necessary. I sat down across from my family and former friends, feeling strangely calm, despite the magnitude of what I was revealing. The most interesting discovery was learning how all of your crimes connected to each other. Ryan, you used money from your construction fraud to fund your relationship with Jessica. Jessica used money from selling stolen medications to help Ryan cover some of his business debts. Madison, you spent my inheritance money believing it came from Ryan's fraudulent business practices. This is insane, Ryan protested. You can't just destroy people's lives because you're angry about a breakup. I'm not destroying anyone's life, I corrected. I'm documenting the destruction you've all caused to other people's lives. Mrs. Harper is now living with her daughter because her kitchen is uninhabitable. Mr. Rodriguez had to take out a second mortgage to hire someone else to fix the damage you caused. Jessica's theft has contributed to medication shortages that affect legitimate patients. Patricia was crying openly now. Amy, sweetheart, we made mistakes, but we're still your family. Family, I repeated thoughtfully. Let me tell you what I learned about family during my time in Guatemala. I worked with children who had lost everything, but they still looked out for each other. They shared their food, protected the smaller kids, and celebrated each other's successes. They understood that family means supporting each other through difficulties, not exploiting each other's vulnerabilities. I pulled out another document. This is a cooperation agreement prepared by the district attorney's office. Every person in this room has 24 hours to decide whether they want to cooperate with the investigation and make restitution to their victims or face full prosecution for their crimes. What kind of cooperation? Gerald asked quietly. Ryan will provide a complete list of all the clients he defrauded, return any money he still has, and testify against his business partners who were involved in the scheme. Jessica will surrender her nursing license, enter rehabilitation for her stealing problem, and provide information about her buyers to help law enforcement track down other sources of illegal prescription drugs. And us, Patricia asked. You and Gerald will attend financial counseling, pay back every penny you stole from Madison's college fund with interest, and perform 200 hours of community service, helping elderly people avoid contractor fraud. Madison looked up with tears streaming down her face. What about me? Madison, you'll publicly admit your fraud on social media, personally apologize to every person you bragged to about your wealthy marriage, return my wedding dress, and every gift Marcus bought you with my money, and complete 100 hours of community service. And if we don't agree to this? Ryan asked. I closed the folder and stood up. Then tomorrow morning, Detective Thompson arrests all of you, and you can explain your choices to a judge instead of working with prosecutors to minimize the damage you've caused. The room fell silent except for the sound of Patricia's quiet sobbing. I looked at each person in turn, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time in my life. I'm staying at the Hampton Inn tonight, I announced. "You have until noon tomorrow to decide. Marcus will be leaving with me now since his job here is finished." Marcus gathered his few belongings while everyone watched in stunned silence. As we reached the front door, Madison called out, "Amy, wait. Can I ask you something?" I turned back to face my sister. "What? Do you hate us?" I considered her question carefully before answering. "No, Madison, I don't hate you. But I've learned that love without accountability isn't really love at all. It's just enabling bad behavior. And I love you all too much to let you keep destroying other people's lives without consequences." With that, Marcus and I walked out of my childhood home, leaving my family to contemplate the choices that had brought them to this moment. The next morning at 11:30, my phone rang. It was Patricia, her voice shaky but determined. "Amy, we've all talked through the night. We want to meet with you to discuss the cooperation agreement." I had been sitting in the hotel restaurant nursing my third cup of coffee and watching Marcus practice his lines for an upcoming audition. Despite everything that had happened, he was still pursuing his acting career, though he admitted our situation had given him enough material for dramatic monologues to last several years. "All of you?" I asked. "All of us," she confirmed. "Even Ryan and Jessica. Can you come to the house at 1 o'clock? 2 hours later, I walked back into my family's living room to find everyone arranged around the coffee table, like defendants awaiting sentencing. The thick legal folder sat in the center of the table, and I noticed that several additional documents had been added to the pile. Gerald stood up when I entered something he hadn't done the previous day. "Amy, before we discuss the legal agreements, I need to say something to you." I remained standing, keeping my emotional distance. "I'm listening." "I failed you as a father," he said simply. I got so caught up in the idea of Madison landing what I thought was a wealthy husband that I forgot my responsibility to both my daughters. I should have stopped this madness the moment Madison suggested marrying Ryan while you were away. Patricia nodded tearfully. I was so worried about Madison's future financial security that I convinced myself this was somehow good for our family. I told myself that you would understand, that you would want your sister to be happy. "By stealing my fiancé and my wedding dress?" I asked quietly. "By stealing your life." Madison interjected, her voice barely audible. "That's what we really did. We tried to steal your entire life because I was jealous of everything you had accomplished." I sat down across from them, noting that Ryan and Jessica had positioned themselves slightly apart from my family members. "Madison, what exactly were you jealous of?" Madison took a shuddering breath. "Your nursing degree, your independence, your ability to make a difference in people's lives. Ryan always talked about how proud he was of your career, how you were saving children's lives while I was just cleaning teeth. When he described the humanitarian work you were doing in Guatemala, I felt so small and meaningless by comparison. So you decided to take what I had instead of building something meaningful for yourself. I thought if I could become Ryan's wife, I could become the important, successful person in the family instead of always being Amy's little sister who never quite measured up." Marcus, who had been quietly observing from the corner, spoke up. "Madison, can I share something with you?" She nodded hesitantly. "During the 2 months I pretended to be Ryan, you told me dozens of stories about your work as a dental hygienist. The elderly patients who looked forward to seeing you, the children you helped overcome their fear of dental procedures, the way you could calm anxious patients with your gentle manner. You were already making a meaningful difference in people's lives." "But it seemed so small compared to what Amy was doing," Madison protested. "Helping people is never small," I said softly. "Every person you've helped feel comfortable and safe during a dental procedure, every child you've helped overcome their fear, that's meaningful work, Madison. You just never saw it that way." Ryan cleared his throat impatiently. "This is all very touching, but can we get to the legal situation? My business is hemorrhaging money while this investigation hangs over my head." I turned to look at my former fiancé, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. "Ryan, your business is failing because you've been defrauding your clients, not because of this investigation." "I made some poor business decisions," he admitted reluctantly. but I never intended to hurt anyone. Jessica placed her hand on her pregnant belly. Ryan, maybe it's time to tell them the truth about everything. What truth? I asked. Ryan rubbed his face with both hands, looking exhausted. My family's construction business went bankrupt 6 months before I started dating you, Amy. My father had been embezzling from client accounts for years, and when it came to light, we lost everything. The business, our house, our reputation, everything. I stared at him in shock. So when you were dating me, you were already involved in fraud. I was trying to rebuild the business legitimately at first, Ryan explained, but I couldn't get bonding or insurance because of my father's criminal record. So I started taking jobs under the table using inferior materials to cut costs, taking shortcuts wherever I could. And Jessica knew about this. Jessica nodded miserably. I helped him set up fake business accounts and create false references from supposed previous clients. I thought I was helping him get back on his feet so we could have a real future together. A future built on stealing from elderly people, Marcus pointed out. We never looked at it that way, Jessica protested. We told ourselves we were just trying to survive until Ryan could get his legitimate business credentials back. I pulled out a new set of documents I hadn't shown them the previous day. This might interest all of you. I've been working with a lawyer who specializes in white-collar crime and family fraud. Yesterday, after our confrontation, I asked him to prepare a different kind of agreement. Gerald leaned forward nervously. Different how? This isn't just about prosecution and punishment, I explained. It's about restoration and making things right for the people who were actually harmed by your actions. I opened to the first page. Ryan, instead of just facing criminal charges, you're going to personally work with each family you defrauded to complete their projects properly. You'll hire legitimate contractors, use quality materials, and oversee every job until it's finished to the customer's satisfaction. That could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, Ryan protested. Which is why Jessica is going to surrender every penny you made from selling stolen medications to help fund these repairs, I continued. And you're both going to take legitimate jobs to pay for the materials and labor costs. Jessica looked stricken. I'll lose my nursing license. You already lost your nursing license the moment you started stealing medications, I pointed out. But if you cooperate fully and complete a rehabilitation program, you might be able to apply for reinstatement in 5 years. I turned to Madison. Madison, you're going to return to dental hygiene school and complete your degree, but you're also going to spend every weekend for the next year volunteering at the free clinic downtown, helping people who can't afford dental care. I can't afford to go back to school, Madison said quietly. Patricia spoke up. Yes, you can. Gerald and I are going to take out a loan against the house to restore your college fund and pay for your final year of education. You'd do that? Madison asked, surprised. Gerald nodded firmly. We should have done it a year ago instead of encouraging this foolishness. I looked at my parents with new respect. Patricia and Gerald, your community service will involve teaching financial literacy classes to young adults, helping them understand how to avoid the kind of financial manipulation and fraud that you fell victim to. We fell victim to, Patricia asked. You were targeted by people who knew how to exploit your love for your daughter and your fears about her future security, I explained. Ryan and Jessica identified your vulnerabilities and used them to gain your cooperation in their schemes. Ryan started to protest, but I held up my hand to stop him. The most important part of this agreement, I continued, is that all of you are going to participate in family counseling together, not couples counseling or individual therapy, but sessions where you'll work together to understand how your actions affected each other and the innocent people who got caught up in your choices. Marcus pulled out his phone to check the time. Amy, there's one more thing we need to tell them. I nodded, knowing this was the moment I'd been both anticipating and dreading. The fake marriage between Marcus and Madison. I began has an unexpected legal complication that changes everything about this situation. Madison looked confused. What kind of complication? Marcus and I exchanged glances before he answered. Madison, when I created the fake identity documents to marry you, I didn't just make up a name. I legally changed my name to Ryan Marcus Thompson through the court system. The marriage certificate we signed is actually legally valid. The room fell completely silent. You're legally married to me, Marcus continued gently, which means everything I told you about my feelings developing into something real wasn't part of the act. I genuinely care about you, Madison, and I've been trying to figure out how to tell you that despite how this all started. Madison stared at him in complete shock. We're really married. Really married, he confirmed. And there's something else you don't know about me that might change how you feel about this whole situation. Madison's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been hope as she processed Marcus's words. What else don't I know about you? Marcus took a deep breath, glancing at me for encouragement before continuing. My family owns Thompson Entertainment Group. We operate a chain of theaters and entertainment venues throughout the Midwest. I've been living modestly since college because I wanted to succeed as an actor based on my own merit, not my family's money. Gerald's eyebrows shot up. Thompson Entertainment Group. The company that owns the Palace Theater downtown and the amphitheater complex. Among others, Marcus confirmed, my trust fund became available when I turned 25 last year. I could have accessed it at any time, but I've been determined to make my own way in the world. Madison's voice came out as barely a whisper. You're actually wealthy. Very, Marcus admitted. But Madison, that's not why I'm telling you this. I'm telling you because over the past 2 months, even though our relationship started as a deception, I've come to genuinely admire your passion, your sense of humor, and your capacity for caring about others. Jessica snorted derisively, her capacity for caring. She tried to steal her sister's fiancé for money. Marcus turned to face Jessica with a calm intensity that reminded me why he was such an effective actor. Jessica, you're hardly in a position to judge anyone's character, considering you've been stealing medications from patients and having an affair with an engaged man. Ryan jumped to his feet. Don't talk to my wife that way. Your wife, Marcus repeated thoughtfully. Ryan, when exactly did you and Jessica get married? 4 months ago, Ryan replied defensively, right after I broke up with Amy. I pulled out my phone and showed him a document on the screen. This is interesting because according to the records I obtained yesterday, Jessica was still legally married to her first husband, David Warner, when she married you. The color drained from both Ryan and Jessica's faces. David and I separated 2 years ago, Jessica protested. We've been living apart. Separated, I emphasized, but never divorced, which means your marriage to Ryan is invalid, and Jessica, you've committed bigamy, which is a felony in this state. Ryan sank back into his chair. Our marriage isn't legal. Not even close, I confirmed. Jessica, you're still legally married to David Warner, who incidentally is a pharmaceutical investigator for the state health department, the same department that will be very interested in your medication theft activities. Jessica's hand moved protectively to her belly. The baby will be Ryan's responsibility as the biological father, I said matter-of-factly. But you two have no legal relationship to each other. Marcus stepped closer to Madison. Madison, I'm offering you a choice. We can have our marriage annulled and you can walk away from this entire situation. Or if you're willing, we can try to build something real together, starting with complete honesty from both of us. Why would you want to stay married to me? Madison asked, tears beginning to form in her eyes. I tried to use you for money that I thought belonged to someone else. I quit my job because I thought I was too good to work. I betrayed my sister and destroyed my family. Because, Marcus said gently, I've seen who you are when you think no one is judging you. I've heard you talk about your patients with genuine compassion. I've watched you care for your parents when they were worried about finances. I've seen you cry while watching romantic movies because you still believe in happy endings. He paused, running his hand through his hair. And because I think we're both people who made poor choices for understandable reasons, and we both deserve a chance to become better versions of ourselves. Madison looked around the room at her family, then back at Marcus. "You really want to try to make this work, even after everything?" "I do," Marcus replied, "but only if you're committed to building a relationship based on honesty, mutual respect, and genuine care for each other. No more schemes, no more deception, no more trying to be someone you're not." Patricia wiped her eyes with a tissue. "Madison, sweetheart, this young man is offering you something that doesn't come along often. A chance to start over with someone who already knows your worst mistakes and chooses to love you anyway." Gerald nodded in agreement. "Your mother's right. Marcus, you're a good man for giving Madison this opportunity." I watched this exchange with mixed emotions. Part of me was amazed that something positive could emerge from such a web of deception and betrayal. Another part of me worried that Madison hadn't truly learned from her mistakes. "Madison," I said quietly, "if you choose to stay married to Marcus and try to build a real relationship with him, I need you to understand something important." She turned to look at me with genuine attention for the first time since this whole situation began. "This isn't a fairy tale where love conquers all and erases the consequences of poor choices. If you want this to work, you're going to have to do the hard work of becoming someone worthy of the trust Marcus is offering you." "I know," she replied, her voice stronger than it had been all day. "And I want to try. Marcus, I want to go back to school and finish my dental hygiene degree. I want to volunteer at the free clinic like Amy suggested. I want to become someone you can be proud to be married to." Marcus smiled, and for the first time since I'd orchestrated this entire situation, I felt genuinely happy about the outcome. "There's just one more thing," I announced, pulling out the final set of documents from my folder. "The cooperation agreements I mentioned yesterday, they've all been signed by the district attorney's office. Ryan, you start working with your defrauded clients next Monday. Jessica, you surrender your nursing license and begin rehabilitation next week. Everyone else begins their community service and counseling requirements immediately." Ryan looked defeated but resigned. "And if we complete all of these requirements, then the criminal charges will be reduced to misdemeanors with probation instead of felony convictions with prison time," I explained. "You'll all have records, but you'll be free to rebuild your lives." Jessica placed both hands on her belly. "What about the baby?" "That's between you and Ryan to figure out," I said firmly. "But I'd suggest starting with honesty about your respective legal and financial situations." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where I'd grown up. Everything looked the same as it had yesterday, but I felt like I was seeing it clearly for the first time. "There's something I need to tell all of you," I said, turning back to face the room. "This experience has taught me something important about forgiveness." I looked at each person in turn. Forgiveness isn't about pretending that harmful actions didn't happen or excusing behavior because someone is family. Real forgiveness means holding people accountable for their choices while still leaving room for them to become better. Gerald stood up and walked over to me. "Amy, can you ever forgive us for what we did to you?" I considered his question carefully. "Dad, I can forgive you for making poor choices based on good intentions, but the trust that we used to have, that's going to take time and consistent good behavior to rebuild." Patricia joined us by the window. "What can we do to start rebuilding that trust?" "Follow through on your commitments," I replied simply. "Complete your community service, attend counseling, pay back Madison's college fund, and start treating both your daughters with equal respect and support." I looked over at Madison and Marcus, who were sitting close together on the couch, talking quietly. "And stop trying to fix Madison's problems by enabling her poor choices. She's capable of making good decisions when she's held accountable for the bad ones." As I prepared to leave, Madison called out to me one more time. "Amy, will you be my maid of honor when Marcus and I renew our vows and have a real wedding?" I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. "Madison, if you can prove to me over the next year that you've truly changed, that you've become someone who deserves Marcus's trust and love, then I would be honored to stand with you at your real wedding." "Deal," she replied, extending her hand for me to shake. As I shook my sister's hand, I realized that sometimes the best revenge is giving people the opportunity to become better than they ever thought possible. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my new apartment preparing lunch while video chatting with David Martinez, the mission supervisor who had become so much more than a colleague during my time in Guatemala. The afternoon sunlight streamed through my windows, illuminating the small potted herbs I'd started growing on the windowsill, a reminder of the garden we'd tended together at the orphanage. The grant application was approved. David announced, his smile filling my laptop screen. We'll be able to expand the medical clinic and add 2 more classrooms to the school. That's wonderful news, I replied, feeling the familiar warmth that came with knowing we were making a real difference in children's lives. When do you think construction will begin? Next month, which means I'll need to be here to oversee the project. But Amy, I've been thinking about our conversation last week. I paused in my meal preparation, knowing he was referring to our discussion about the future of our relationship. David had been planning to visit me in the States next month, but the construction project would delay his trip indefinitely. I've been thinking about it too, I admitted, and I've made a decision. His expression grew serious. What kind of decision? I'm coming back to Guatemala. I announced, feeling a sense of peace settle over me as I spoke the words aloud for the first time. My supervisor at the hospital has approved a 1-year leave of absence. I can work at the clinic in Guatemala and help with the medical training program we discussed. David's face lit up with joy and relief. Are you certain I know how much your work at the pediatric hospital means to you? It does mean a lot to me, I agreed. But I've learned that making a difference doesn't require staying in one place forever. The skills I've developed here can be just as valuable in Guatemala, maybe more so. I glanced at the photo on my refrigerator showing David and me with a group of children we'd worked with. Their faces reminded me daily that some opportunities for meaningful work were worth any sacrifice. Besides, I continued with a smile, someone very wise once told me that love isn't about convenience or comfort. It's about choosing to build something meaningful with someone who shares your values and supports your dreams. Before David could respond, my doorbell rang. That's Madison, I explained. She's picking me up for family counseling. We've all been going together for the past 4 months. How is that progressing? David asked. Better than I expected, I admitted, walking to the door. Madison has really surprised me with how committed she's been to changing. I opened the door to find my sister standing there in her dental hygiene student uniform, holding a small bouquet of flowers from the grocery store. These are for you, she said simply. I know they're not much, but I wanted to thank you for coming to my graduation ceremony last week. Madison, you didn't need to bring me anything, I protested, but I was touched by the gesture. I was proud to be there. You worked hard for that degree. I wanted to bring them because 6 months ago, I would never have thought to thank someone for supporting me. I would have just assumed it was something I deserved. She paused, her expression becoming more serious. Marcus has been teaching me to recognize the difference between entitlement and gratitude, and I invited her in while I finished getting ready for our appointment. How are things going with Marcus? Madison's face softened in a way I'd never seen before. We're taking things slowly, building our relationship from the ground up. We go on actual dates now where we talk about our dreams and fears instead of just trying to impress each other. He's been helping me with my business plan for the mobile dental clinic I want to start for underserved communities. Business plan? I asked, surprised. I want to do something meaningful with my career like you've always done with yours. Marcus suggested I could use my dental training to help people who can't afford regular care. His family's foundation is interested in providing funding if I can demonstrate that I'm serious about the commitment. I studied my sister's face, looking for signs of the selfishness and entitlement that had characterized her behavior for so many years. Instead, I saw someone who was genuinely excited about helping others. Madison, I have to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Of course, she replied immediately. Are you doing all of this because you think it's what Marcus wants to hear, or because you genuinely want to change who you are? Madison was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer carefully. 6 months ago, I would have been doing it to manipulate Marcus into staying with me. But honestly, Amy working at the free clinic these past months has shown me something I never understood before, which is, helping people feels better than using people, she said simply. When I see a patient's relief after we've treated their tooth pain, or when a child stops being afraid of dentists because I was gentle and patient with them, I feel proud of myself in a way I never did when I was just trying to get things from other people. We climbed into Madison's car, a modest sedan she'd bought with money from her part-time job, rather than asking Marcus for help. As we drove toward the counseling center, she continued talking. Marcus told me something last month that really stuck with me. He said that the difference between love and manipulation is that love makes you want to become a better person for your own sake, not just to keep someone else happy. I glanced at my sister, noting the absence of the designer clothes and expensive accessories she used to consider essential. She looked younger, somehow more genuine. Madison, can I tell you something I've learned over the past 6 months? Please do. Watching you change, seeing the effort you've put into becoming someone better, it's taught me that people really can grow beyond their worst mistakes if they're willing to do the work. Madison's eyes filled with tears, but she kept them focused on the road. Does that mean you trust me again? It means I'm starting to trust you again, I replied honestly. Trust has to be rebuilt gradually through consistent actions over time. But Madison, you're doing the work, and I can see the difference. We pulled into the parking lot of the counseling center where Gerald and Patricia were waiting for us. Over the past months, I'd watched my parents grapple with their own role in the family dysfunction. Gerald had thrown himself into his community service work with elderly fraud victims, discovering a passion for protecting vulnerable people that reminded me of the father I'd admired as a child. Patricia had become a different person through her financial literacy teaching. She'd learned to recognize the fears and insecurities that made people susceptible to manipulation, and she developed a talent for helping others avoid the mistakes she'd made. Girls. Patricia greeted us warmly, but without the overwhelming emotionality that used to characterize her interactions with us. How was your week? As we walked into the building together, Madison updated our parents on her school progress and clinic work, while I shared news about my plans to return to Guatemala. The conversation felt natural and supportive in a way our family interactions never had before. Dr. Sarah Williams, our family therapist, greeted us in her office with her usual calm professionalism. Over the months, she'd helped us navigate the complex process of rebuilding relationships damaged by years of unhealthy patterns. Amy, Dr. Williams began once we were all settled. You mentioned last week that you had some news to share with your family. I do, I confirmed, looking at each of my family members. I've decided to return to Guatemala to continue my humanitarian work there. I'll be leaving in 2 months. Gerald's face showed immediate concern. For how long? Initially for 1 year, but possibly longer depending on how the projects develop. Patricia leaned forward in her chair. Amy, are you leaving because you still feel uncomfortable being around us? I appreciated that she asked the question directly rather than dancing around it. No, Mom. I'm leaving because I've found work that feels meaningful and a relationship that makes me happy. This decision isn't about running away from you, it's about running towards something that feels right for my life. Madison smiled genuinely. You're talking about David, aren't you, the mission supervisor you've been video chatting with? I am. I confirmed, feeling a warmth spread through my chest at the mention of his name. David and I have been building a relationship based on shared values and genuine respect for each other. He challenges me to be my best self, and he supports my dreams instead of trying to change them. Dr. Williams nodded approvingly. Amy, it sounds like you've learned to recognize the difference between healthy and unhealthy relationship patterns. I have, I agreed. And I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't matter. It means choosing to move forward without being controlled by past hurts. Gerald spoke up quietly. Amy, before you go back to Guatemala, I want you to know something. Watching you handle this entire situation with such strength and grace, it's made me proud to be your father in a way I haven't felt in years. Dad, I replied softly, that means more to me than you know. Our session continued with discussions about how to maintain our family relationships across distance, how to continue supporting Madison's growth, and how to ensure that the positive changes we'd all made would be sustainable over time. As we prepared to leave, Dr. Williams made an observation that resonated with all of us. What I've witnessed in your family over these months is remarkable. You've taken a situation that could have destroyed your relationships permanently and used it as an opportunity to build something stronger and healthier. That evening, Madison, Marcus, and I had dinner together at a small restaurant downtown. Marcus had become a true friend over the months, someone I genuinely enjoyed spending time with beyond his role in my family's drama. I have an announcement too, Marcus said as we finished our meal. I've been accepted into the graduate program in social work at the State University. Madison's face lit up with pride. Marcus, that's wonderful. When do you start? This fall, he replied. I've realized that my experience with your family showed me how much I enjoy helping people work through complex problems. Acting will always be my passion, but I think social work might be my calling. I raised my glass of water in a toast to new beginnings and second chances. To family, Madison added, the kind we choose and the kind we rebuild. To love that helps us become better people, Marcus concluded. As we clinked our glasses together, I reflected on how dramatically our lives had changed over the past year. The betrayal that had initially devastated me had ultimately led each of us to discover strength and capacity for growth we never knew we possessed. A month later, I stood in the same living room where this entire story had begun, but everything felt different. The room had been rearranged, updated with new furniture that reflected my parents' more modest lifestyle. Family photos now showed genuine smiles instead of posed perfection. Madison and Marcus were renewing their vows the following week with a small ceremony that focused on their genuine commitment to each other rather than impressing others. I would indeed be Madison's maid of honor, an honor I now felt she had truly earned through her transformation. Ryan and Jessica's story had ended less happily, but more justly. Ryan was working as a construction supervisor for a legitimate company, slowly paying restitution to his former clients under court supervision. Jessica had lost her nursing license permanently but was working as a medical assistant while caring for their daughter born 3 months earlier. Most importantly, the elderly victims of Ryan's fraud had their homes repaired and their faith in humanity partially restored through the restorative justice program we'd helped establish. As I prepared for my return to Guatemala, I carried with me lessons that would guide the rest of my life. I'd learned that justice isn't about punishment, but about creating accountability that allows people to make things right. I discovered that forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, not a favor you grant others. Most significantly, I'd realized that betrayal can either destroy you or reveal your capacity for strength you never knew you possessed. The airplane ticket to Guatemala sat on my dresser next to a photo of David and me working together at the orphanage clinic. In 2 days, I would board that plane and begin a new chapter of my life with someone who shared my values and supported my dreams. But tonight I was having dinner with my family, the one I'd helped rebuild from the ashes of betrayal and deception. We would share stories, laugh together, and continue the ongoing work of loving each other while holding each other accountable. The greatest lesson of this entire experience was realizing that some stories don't end with revenge or happily ever after. The best stories end with people choosing to become better versions of themselves and committing to the daily work of building something meaningful from whatever remains after the worst has happened. As I looked around at my transformed family, I felt grateful for every painful moment that had led us to this place of genuine connection and mutual respect. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the doorway to the best life you never imagined was possible. Now I'd love to hear from all of you. Have you ever discovered that a betrayal in your life ultimately led to positive changes you wouldn't have made otherwise? How do you balance forgiveness with accountability when someone you love hurts you deeply? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if my story resonated with you. Subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult situations, and please share this with anyone who might benefit from knowing that healing and growth are possible even after the worst betrayals. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it encourages you to believe that your own story of resilience and transformation is worth telling.